2024 is over. Happy 2025, everyone. I'm here in my new studio, which is still partially under construction, but it is up and running enough for me to do my top albums of 2024 video in here. Now, in 2024, I listened to 622 albums, and these are my top 50. Number 50 is Beth Gibbons' album Lives Outgrown. We finally got a solo album from Portishead vocalist Beth Gibbons. It's great to hear her voice again in 2024, and I think this album does a great job of furthering her musical legacy in a way that feels familiar but still fresh. Number 49 is the band O with their album Weirdos. This is an absolutely bonkers saxophone and drums duo. The jams here are fun and infectious, and for the relatively limited instrumental makeup of the band, they still pull off a strong variety of sounds. Number 48 is Willow's new album, Empathogen. This one was a surprise for me. Willow Smith coming out with a weird, jazzy pop album. There's some great songs on here, and I would love for more pop music to be weird and jazzy, frankly. So this was a really impressive and I'd say bold experimental turn for Willow. Number 47 is Adam Wiltse's 11 Fugues for Sodium Pentothal. I know Adam Wiltse as a member of Stars of the Lid and A Winged Victory for the Sullen, both terrific ambient projects. And if you're a fan of any of those groups, then you'll probably like this album. It's just a great ambient record that really pulls you in. At number 46, I have the new Lupe Fiasco album, Samurai. I've really enjoyed where Lupe Fiasco has taken his sound in recent years. His last album, Drill Music in Zion, was one of my favorites of 2022. And on Samurai, he pares things down to 8 tracks over 30 minutes. A tight, distilled album with no fluff and just quality tracks. If you're a hip-hop fan and you've not been keeping up with Lupe, you definitely should be. Number 45 is Layla McCallah's new album, Sun Without the Heat. Layla McCallah is a musician based out of New Orleans and plays in the band Carolina Chocolate Drop. She plays the cello. And while there is a singer-songwriter element here, in very simple terms you could say she's a singer-songwriter, but there are strong folk and Creole and jazz songs and some rock too, making for a really vibrant and varied listening experience that never gets boring. At number 44 is Nadine Shaw, Filthy Underneath. Nadine Shaw is a musician who's hard to classify. This album may fall into the larger category of indie rock or alternative, but the eclectic instrumentation, operatic vocals, and often dark, seething atmosphere gives it a gothic element that I really love. I love the sounds here and I love the songs. At number 43 is, coincidentally, Fortet with 3. I consider Fortet to be one of the best electronic artists, period. He never really disappoints, and this album continues that legacy. Not much more to say. Number 42 is Christopher Owens' I Wanna Run Barefoot Through Your Hair. The former Girls frontman has come back with his first solo release in 9 years, 9 very rough years for Mr. Owens. And he takes this and makes a very heartfelt, endearing indie rock album. And in general, the songs here just really resonated with me. And number 41 is Logic's new album, Ultra 85. I mentioned earlier how Lupe Fiasco's new album is tight and minimal. Well, Logic's new album is the complete opposite of that. It's long, it's got a sci-fi storyline that weaves between the songs, but he really makes it work. I love the beats here, love his flow, and I really admire how he manages to make such personal lyrics fit inside this otherworldly, fictional storytelling. This may be my favorite thing he's done since The Incredible True Story, so I guess that means I just like it when Logic does big sci-fi concept albums. Number 40 on the list is Mabe Frati with Sentir Que No Sabes. So oddly enough, here we have the second cellist on our list, Guatemalan musician Mabe Frati. I was drawn in instantly to the sound of this album. It's heavy and dramatic, but still lush and gorgeous, anchored by Mabe's rich voice that soars above, or sometimes even in opposition to, pounding drums and more experimental textures. This is a really dense, potent album with a lot to offer, and I highly recommend it. Number 39 on my list is Frail Body with Artificial Bouquet. Frail Body is a band from Rockford, Illinois, who classify themselves as screamo, but honestly I get elements of various other metal subgenres like black metal, speed metal, and some post metal. Metal subgenres are difficult to pin down though, and what I love about this album is that it's definitely mixing so many different musical elements from various kinds of heavy music. It's also mixed and produced just right. The drums sound big, the guitars are expertly layered, the bass has a nice mid-rangey grind to it that allows it to stand out in the mix, and the shrieked vocals are just under the instrumentals so that you can feel their intensity and rhythm without them being overpowering, which is a mistake I think a lot of metal bands make. So putting the vocals just right in the mix is a big win for me. Great album from fellow Midwest musicians. At number 38, I've got the new Laura Marling record, Patterns in Repeat. Laura Marling is one of my absolute favorite artists. She's never put out a bad record, and Patterns in Repeat is no exception. To be honest though, this isn't one of my more favorite releases of hers. I tend to like her more full band compositions a little bit more. And this album is a little more folksy and somber, but it's still better than, do the math, 93% of the music that I listened to this year. So still another testament to Laura Marling's enduring greatness. Number 37 is Nilüfer Yanya's My Method Actor. Nilüfer Yanya's last album, Painless, was one of my favorite albums of 2022, so I'd been looking forward to her follow-up, and I think if she keeps this up, she'll be in the top tier of my favorite active artists today. Her vocals have a hushed, yet soulful quality which she layers incredibly well, and her guitar work is just top-notch, alternating effortlessly between fuzzed-out textures and immaculately clean melodic lines. At number 36, I've got Common and Pete Rock's Auditorium Volume 1. Two hip-hop legends teaming up, and I love to see it. I've liked Common's last several albums pretty well, but I think I like this one even better because Pete Rock's production style really keeps Common's vocal ideas more focused. It's a slightly more straightforward album, but I think that's to its benefit because it never gets bloated or overly ambitious. It's always just staying in its lane, doing what it does really well, bringing hip-hop back to finely crafted beats with a lot of nuance and expert flow and lyricism. Number 35 is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album Wild God. After Skeleton Tree and Ghost Teen, an emotionally devastating pair of albums, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds come back with a more full band album that feels both celebratory and skeptical in a way that only Nick Cave can pull off. Great compositions with a lot of feeling, dynamics, and variety. Number 34 is Connor White's Swirling Violets. This is the debut album from Connor White. He's a singer-songwriter from Northern Ireland. There's a strong folk foundation here, but also a lot of atmosphere and some indie pop elements in the instrumentation and production. Really impressive debut. Number 33 is the new Mount Eerie album Night Palace. The latest album from Mount Eerie finds Phil Elverum throwing everything at the wall, and somehow it all sticks. Across the 26 tracks and 81 minutes of this album, you have indie rock, lo-fi, folk, noise rock, a little bit of everything ranging from more traditional to more experimental music, but it all comes together with this consistent underlying darkness that's echoed in the album title and artwork. Phil continues to prove himself as one of the more unique artists in modern music, and while this album may seem intimidating and insurmountable at first, it's impressive how natural and even comforting it feels, even in its more challenging moments. Number 32 is Drala's new album Angel Tape. Drala is an English post-punk band, and this album has all the hallmarks of great post-punk that you would want. Grating guitars, plucky growling bass, frenetic drums, and attitude-filled vocals that straddle the line between speaking and singing. While this may be a familiar sound to many, Drala sets themselves apart with great songwriting, strong use of dynamics, and the occasional saxophone freakout, which I'm always a fan of. Number 31 is Crumb's album Amama. Crumb is a self-proclaimed psych pop band from New York, and while I don't disagree with that label, I'd also say there's strong indie rock and dream pop elements here. It's a sound that I find to be really warm and lovely, but of course what really matters is the songs, and it's a great batch of tunes. Number 30 is Orville Peck's new album Stampede. To be honest, I've never been a huge fan of Orville Peck, but this album really surprised me. Each track has Peck collaborating with at least one other musician, and it's a fascinating guest list. Folks like Elton John, Margot Price, Beck, Allison Russell, Kylie Minogue, and Diplo, just to name a few. While I could see that making the album a little bit disjointed for some listeners, for me it kept the album exciting and engaging and helped make Orville Peck's signature baritone a little more palatable for the full album's run. Number 29 is the new Cure album, Songs of a Lost World. This is the legendary English rock band's first new album in 16 years, but it feels like they never left. The sound and compositional style calls back to some of their classic albums from the 80s, but somehow Robert Smith's vocals still sound terrific in a way that will simultaneously have you asking, how does he sound so young? But also, wait, how did his voice ever carry all that wisdom and experience even when he was just like in his 20s? He's kind of always been that way, and it's amazing. Number 28 is MJ Linderman's Manning Fireworks. MJ Linderman has kind of been blowing up recently, and I understand why. His blend of slacker rock, alt-country, jangly indie rock, and endearingly nonsensical lyrics to me recall early Beck and Pavement, but with a sonic fidelity and purpose that shows how seriously he takes his craft. This is a great batch of songs, and I bet they sound even better played loudly on a houseboat. Number 27 on my list is the new Midwife album, No Depression in Heaven. Midwife is the musical project of Madeline Johnston, and her sound, while not complicated, is difficult to describe. The album is primarily made of Johnston's somewhat clean electric guitar and obscured vocals, rich with a ton of reverb and other atmospheric elements, and a notable lack of treble that gives this album a muted tone as though you're listening to it through your neighbor's wall. And in case I'm not being clear, all of these are good things. I find this album to be absolutely captivating and a huge win for both Johnston and the Flenser record label. If you're a fan of artists like Grouper or Have a Nice Life, definitely check this one out. Number 26 is Kendrick Lamar with GNX. Near the end of the year, we were gifted with a surprise Kendrick Lamar album, and while admittedly I do prefer his more sprawling and ambitious albums like Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn, this album really grew on me, and I ended up liking the more focused and direct purpose behind it. Number 25, the halfway point of the list, I've got Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum's album, Of the Last Human Being. This is Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum's first album since 2007, and if you're not familiar with them, they're proggy, they're experimental, they're weird, and they're fantastic. It's like a hellish mix of Swans, Porcupine Tree, and Tom Waits. So if that sounds appealing to you, which it should, you should definitely check this one out. Number 24 is the Staves album, All Now. The Staves are another returning artist on my list, with their previous album, Good Woman, being my third favorite album of 2021. Since then, one of the three sisters, Emily, has left the group and they are now a duo, but this album still has a lot of terrific harmony, diverse songwriting, and production styles. There are even more electronic elements injected into these songs on top of the more folksy foundation. If you're a fan of Haim, First Aid Kit, Lucius, or Bon Iver, and you haven't checked out the Staves, I highly recommend them. Number 23 is LL Cool J, The Force. If you had told me last year that an LL Cool J album would end up being one of my favorite albums of 2024, I might not have believed you. He hadn't released an album since 2013 before this, but this album goes hard, with production from Q-Tip, great performances from LL Cool J, and great guest spots from artists like Nas, Eminem, Busta Rhymes, Saweetie, and more. LL is out here showing that fresh, energetic hip-hop is not just for the youngsters. Number 22 on my list is Lip Critic with their album Hex Dealer. This album is nuts. Lip Critic is a New York band who are blending post-punk, noise rock, and dance music in an alluring yet anxiety-inducing way that's kind of the closest I've heard someone get to Death Grips. I love the sheer boldness and madness of this record. We need more stuff like this in music today, and I'm glad Lip Critic is doing it. Number 21 is Lucy Rose with This Ain't the Way You Go Out. Lucy Rose is an English artist, and this is her 5th album. What I love about it is that there's really tightly performed jazzy piano and drums at its core. Where piano-driven jazz can be kind of stark and angular, here it's quite lush and creates the perfect bed for Lucy Rose's vocals, which are smooth and crystal clear. It's an album whose mixing and production complements the writing and performances perfectly, and the writing here is terrific. All right, getting into the top 20, we have Doechii with Alligator Bites Never Heal. Doechii is a hip-hop artist from Florida who I've been told got big on TikTok a few years ago, and I gotta say, I really don't care about all that. I don't keep up with what's big on TikTok. What I care about are artists who make great albums, and that's what Doechii has done here. She displays a ton of versatility over the course of these 19 tracks, from smoother, more R&B tracks to really hard-hitting, spitfire rapping, and it's a ton of fun to listen to. Number 19 is Naima Bock's new album, Below a Massive Dark Land. This album is another one that's hard to classify, which is something I love in an album, if you haven't noticed. Naima Bock is an English musician, and with acoustic guitar being the primary instrument here, there's definitely an undercurrent of English folk, but I wouldn't pigeonhole her as a folk artist in the same way that I wouldn't pigeonhole Richard Dawson as a folk artist, because there's a lot more than that here. The colorful arrangements sometimes remind me of more early 2000s indie, and there's a freewheeling troubadour kind of spirit here that I really love. Number 18 is Deep Sage by Gouge. I mean, when you name your band after one of my favorite Pixies songs, of course I'm going to be predisposed to like what you're doing. I would classify this as hardcore punk, post-hardcore, some noise rock. Regardless, it's a 35-minute onslaught of driving guitar, bass, and drums with intense vocals. Nothing overly surprising or revolutionary here, but frankly, I don't care when the music's done this well. At number 17, we've got Chat Pile's Cool World. Another great album from the Flinzer label. This is the Oklahoma noise rock metal band's sophomore album, and it is no slump. Ray Gunn Bush has to be one of the most captivating vocalists in rock today. While rarely melodic, he has a persona that just grabs your attention and perfectly complements the absolutely punishing guitar, bass, and drum combo laid down by the rest of the band. These guys are just such an exciting group to follow. Number 16 is Fontaines D.C.'s album Romance. I loved Grind Chatten's solo album from last year, but now the full Irish post-punk group is back with another terrific album, solidifying them as one of the most consistently great active bands right now. I also hear a lot of Cure influence on this record, which is never a bad thing. Number 15 is the new Godspeed You Black Emperor record, no title as of 13th February 2024, 28,340 dead. I think this is my favorite thing Godspeed has done since they started releasing music again more regularly back in 2012. One thing these Canadian post-rock giants have always been good at is creating a fully packaged experience in their music. And what I mean by that is that when you're making music that doesn't have lyrics, it forces your album title, artwork, and song titles to carry more meaning alongside the music itself. And when you listen to these songs with the album title and song title in mind, and think about what's going on in the world, and listen to how the music evolves and builds to create a feeling, it is truly powerful. Number 14 is Wishy's album 777. 777 is the debut album from Wishy, a band from Indianapolis. Look, we're at the point in this list where all of these albums, they have one thing in common, and that's consistently great songwriting. That's certainly the case here. So I'm not going to say it over and over again for every album. But along with that, what I really love about Wishy's sound is they're taking a very 90s alternative shoegaze sound and combining it with a 2000s emo and pop rock sound that just really works for me. I also love the dynamic between the male and female vocalists. They work together really well, and it keeps the album fresh. Number 13 on my list is the new Charli XCX album, Brat. Look, there's nothing I can say about this album that hasn't been said already, but I have to say something, so I'll do my best. I've always appreciated Charli's more futuristic and bold approach to pop production, and on Brat, she successfully applies that approach to a set of songs that are dancey and infectious while still feeling personal and relatable. She's inviting us into the party and dancing with us instead of just DJing for us from the VIP section. Number 12 is Mannequin Pussy's I Got Heaven. This is definitely my favorite thing I've heard from Mannequin Pussy. It's a great blend of punk and indie rock, with the softer moments supporting the more intense ones instead of betraying them. Number 11 on my list is the album Ilion by the band Slift. This is my first experience listening to Slift. They're a prog rock, prog metal band from France. This album is truly epic. Long tracks and a heavy psychedelic sound that reminds me of Elder or Yob, sometimes early Mastodon or Gojira, like before they got much bigger production budgets. If that sounds like your kind of thing, definitely check this one out. All right, top 10. And at number 10, we've got the new Chelsea Wolfe, She Reaches Out to She Reaches Out to She. One thing I love about Chelsea Wolfe is that even when her music isn't heavy, it's still heavy. This album was produced by Dave Sitek of TV on the Radio, which I mean, what a dream team between those two. So there's a great level of electronic polish here, and not quite as much guitar as we got on albums like Hiss Spun, but more of a dooming trip-hop vibe that all ties together with Chelsea Wolfe's always incredible vocals. Number 9 is Emiliana Torrini's Miss Flower. Emiliana Torrini had an album last year with the Colorist Orchestra that was high up on my list, and now she's back already with another solo album, Miss Flower. This album's got really nice, punchy instrumentals, more of an electronic bend, but still lots of earthy tones and samples that anchor it and prevent it from ever feeling like an electronica album. Another great record from the ever-evolving Icelandic artist. Number 8 is Elbow's Audio Vertigo. Elbow, they're one of my favorite bands ever. Back with what might be my favorite album of theirs since 2014's The Takeoff and Landing of Everything. This has all the things you want from an Elbow album. Guy Garvey's fantastic vocals, incredibly detailed production, and instrumentals that are never showy but always impressive and in perfect service of the song. This album has a little more synth and also a little more rock and guitar than their last few have had though, and overall I found this to be a really memorable set of songs. Number 7 is the Mysterines with their album Afraid of Tomorrows. Another returning artist, the Mysterines' debut album Reeling was my 13th favorite album of 2022, and now the British rockers have climbed even higher with their new one. I love the drama in vocalist Leah Metcalf's voice, she just keeps getting better, but the band as a whole is adding a lot of intrigue to what could otherwise be a very traditional, punky alt-rock, hard rock sound. Number 6 is Ty Segall's album 3 Bells. This is Ty Segall doing what he does best, more fuzzy psychedelic rock numbers with a lot of great acoustic guitar mixed in as well. Even at 15 songs and over an hour long, this album always held my attention. Number 5 is Sprint's Letter to Self. Honestly, a lot of the things I just said a couple minutes ago about the Mysterines album applies to this Irish rock band. But where the Mysterines are becoming harder hitting and upping their production value, on this debut album from the Sprints, they're keeping their production a little more lo-fi to complement their noisy garage rock post-punky sound. There's a lot of space on this record, and even when it's not intense, there's still loads of tension, and I love it. Number 4 on my list is Blood Incantation with Absolute Elsewhere. This album is getting a ton of hype, and for good reason. The writing here is so forward-thinking in the way it blends so many metal genres with spacey, proggy, Pink Floyd-esque sections, and even a Tangerine Dream collaboration. It may be a little overwrought for some metalheads, but for me, I love the ambition and the sheer amount of ground that's covered here, while still making it a cohesive front-to-back album. Number 3 on my list is Heynderickx with Seed of a Seed. This is Heynderickx's second album, and it makes me very upset that I was not aware of her debut when it came out. This album is great. If you haven't noticed, I love lush production, especially for folksy albums, which this is. It's just got the perfect layering and arrangements while maintaining a natural, earthy sound and never feeling overdone. Heynderickx is combining all of my favorite elements of artists like Laura Marling and Regina Spektor here and just running with it. Alright, second best album of 2024 for me was Shoo Shoo with 13-inch Frank Beltrame Italian stilettos with bison horn grips. This is one of my favorite things this band has done, and they already had an impressive body of work. It's got Xiuxiu's trademark noisy, textured sound design, but within that, there are driving drums and just incredible guitar riffs, particularly highlighted on the singles Common Loon and Beneficium, which gives the album more of a rock feel than some of their past work. But then again, there are also still some great synth-driven tracks and ambient moments. It's just everything I love about this band rolled into 9 incredibly strong tracks. Also, I had the honor of opening for Xiuxiu when they came through Des Moines last fall, and they are the nicest people in the world. And at number 1, my favorite album of 2024 is St. Vincent's All Born Screaming. This was by far the album I came back to the most this year. St. Vincent is one of my favorite artists active today, and this is one of those albums where some of the songs are more immediate than others. I love Broken Man and Big Time Nothing right away. Then tracks like Flea and Sweetest Fruit snuck up on me, and every time I listened to this thing, some of the less aggressive songs just started sticking with me. It just kept growing and growing on me. This is my favorite album of St. Vincent's, at least in the last 10 years, and also my favorite album of 2024. So what do you think? In 2023, I mentioned that there wasn't a lot of hip-hop or metal on my list, and boy was that different this year. Also, a lot of great singer-songwriter albums, and just hard rock in general. What albums from my list do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? What do you think about where music is going in general? Let me know, and thanks for watching.